I became a member, I guess it would be 1978. Obviously, we're much smaller. We tended to all know each other. I just remember that there was a lot more social interaction in the shul in those days.
We moved to West Orange and became members in 1973. For those of you who remember the dinner in 1993, the song was 1973, just Molly and me. In the 70s, we were still davening in what was the church in the early 70s. Then the first part of this building was completed. I think we moved in 74, 75.
For the holidays, we were upstairs in a room that was, I guess, half the size it is now, maybe even smaller than that, with no air conditioning. Social hall was nowhere near as big, and people were having trouble getting seats.
The sanctuary was initially built in the mid-70s, and by the late 80s, there was a perceived need for further expansion. We tried getting it passed through the membership several times. At the time I became president in 1988, the situation was ripe and people were ready. My presidency was 88 to 91, and during that time, the concept of expanding the building passed by a 2-to-1 margin, and then the opening was after the time of my first presidency was concluded.
And Steve and I had talked about these things, and he approached me and said, sort of mutually decided that I was going to become the chairman of the expansion committee. We put together a number of, I guess, questionnaires that we put out. What were people looking for at that time? What did they want from the shul? The question, of course, was what we could afford. One of the first things we started doing was going to members who we thought might be willing to contribute, so we knew what kind of budget we were dealing with. But I think we quickly determined that it was going to be relatively moderate and modest. The Sephardic minyan, specifically Al Jacob, was very intent on having a Sephardic minyan. One of the concerns and problems was that the bylaws said that we were an Ashkenazi shul. We agreed that we would only do it if it was paid for separately and apart from the rest of the building. Whoever was going to be part of that minyan would become a member, and that the members would contribute more than simply what the cost of keeping that particular structure up was. Were we going to have a mortgage? And it was determined that we had to have a mortgage in order to do something. The only thing we ran across, of course, with the town was the question of parking. We actually were taking parking away because the only thing that we really expanded on the footprint was going back further in the social hall and putting the Sephardic minyan on a piece of the ground that we had.
There's no question but that the expanded shul contributed to a lot more growth of new members and people who were considering West Orange at the time.
This is before there were other synagogues in town. We didn't want to go too far back because then nobody could hear us. And that was the purpose of putting in these walls that could expand and contract. Yeah, we had to bring in an acoustical engineer. Even the paint on the walls was supposed to help with the acoustics. The project lasted 5 years. It wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a long, long haul. And there were a lot of people who worked on it. So yes, by all means, I think Steve's right. Line up your finances. Realize what you're going to need, not only now, but in the future. We've all grown old together. We've made lots of friends because we've stayed in the community for long, long periods of time.